Let's get busy.
There.
All right.
There you go. Michael Jones in the house. What's up, man?
All right. Not much. Just me barely.
Barely?
Yeah, I'm
Are
an
you
old
tired?
man now. So
Well, I appreciate you, dudes. We had you on before. Some technical difficulties got you back on. And, but your man, in that first recording, although we couldn't use it, I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm realizing you are into a lot of things.
yeah, I like to stay busy.
Yeah, but I noticed you, connected with you on social media, Facebook, as a freelance journalist who, I know you're a courier and all this stuff. So give us a little bit. What's up with MJ?
Well, I've been a local journalist for about 30 years now, which is hurts me to say, but I started out with Leo, and
That's got to give you status, some status. Right?
I was there. I started writing for Leo in '91, and at first I was a freelancer. And they needed a staff writer, but they didn't have the money, so they hired me as the receptionist.
Yeah.
So I answered phones and wrote stories, and then I went to the.
But you were I guess a phone reception, whatever.
Yeah.
But as you were doing that job, in the background, you're writing.
Yeah, if a story came up, I would do it, and I would do stories. In the beginning we had something called the Six Pack, where it was 6 writers that shared the cover, and so that's how I met Carl Brown was one of them.
Okay, yeah.
Michael Lindenberger, who was at the Dallas Morning News, but I think he's moved to Houston. Doug Bagley, he's a reporter in Colorado now. Mm-hmm. So everybody kind of went off from there, and I think let's see, a lot of people from the early days of Leo got out of journalism. I think I stayed in it the longest. I went to the Defender, went to across the river to the Jeffersonville Evening News. Leo hired me back. Then I worked for the Courier for a couple years, and
as a writer at the
well, actually, I worked not in the editorial department. I worked for the advertising department, writing the inserts that go into the Courier. So we would be working on magazines,
right,
like those little magazines everybody throws away because they want the ads,
So you can acknowledge it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It didn't bother me. I got paid, and then most recently I was writing for Insider Louisville, which I wrote for them for 2 or 3 years before they went kaput, and so I was lucky that I started kind of phasing out of just straight journalism and getting more into history. When I wrote my book on Louisville jug music,
and that was almost because when we shared that, I had no clue on the history, on that history here, and you shared some stories where was blown away that how much real history of music is here in the state or in Louisville.
Yeah.
So, but keep going.
Because people forget that in the old movies when they talk about going west, they were starting at Kentucky. This is where Lewis and Clark started mapping out the West, and Louisville from the beginning has been a big river town. We've attracted a lot of people, and they brought their music to them and with them, and we're connected through the river with New Orleans and Memphis and all the other river towns. Right. So it was when I was at Underground Sounds in '91, and I was going through some import CDs from Austria, and I came across one called Clifford Hayes and the Jug Bands of Louisville. And not only was it Louisville, Kentucky, but they were African Americans, and I thought, jug music was this white mountain music.
That's what I had thought too. And then you
uncovered this.
Then
whole
you played
history.
the black card on me, and then realized, There's but keep going because this history there is amazing.
Well, a lot of it is I'm watching in this Ken Burns documentary, the country music documentary. In the first episode, there's a picture, a little video of Whistler's Jug Band. It was a Louisville Jug Band. And he talks about Jimmy Rogers recording with the Jug Band, and that was the Louisville Jug Band. That happened here in Louisville in 1931. 31. Wow. Yeah, and that happened at a warehouse on Main Street that happened to be where the Kentucky Center for the Arts is today.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And there was one other Louisville thing related thing that he mentioned, but he didn't actually mention Louisville, but, people who knew the history. Yeah. Like myself.
I guess as a freelance journalist, you kind of stumble into this. It's kind of like a hobby for a long time. It wasn't like I found out about it in '91. Well, but when you started it, when you realized you figured out that with jug music, and the connection with Louisville or Kentucky, and then this black connection. I mean, it's like, and then it just took off from there for you.
Well, because, most people don't realize the banjo came from Africa, and the jug playing came with it from West Africa. And, you never think of, where's the kazoo come from,
Where does it?
Yeah. They had, in Africa, in the mask, they would put these voice disguisers. And so they were used in religious rites because if you're messing around with spirits, you don't want them following you home. And when, the West Africans came to America as slaves, those things lost their ritual purpose.
So the kazoo wasn't per se a musical instrument when it first?
No, the Africans had horns that the kazoo is based on. Okay. The way those horns were made.
But you said the tie to kind of
to jug playing comes, because jug playing. They're in Nigeria. They have an instrument that is called udu. That is just a water jug with an extra hole cut into it. And, there, as early as 1700, there's mentions of slaves blowing in the bottles to make music because they didn't have access to instruments. Mm-hmm. The original, banjos were made out of gourds and, things that they could find.
Wow.
And even Thomas Jefferson talks about it. He calls it a banjer. Says that every slave is carrying a banjer. And then in my talks that I do, I show some old paintings from the South where painters were depicting this. And so it's just like that British fiddle met the African banjo and got that old time music going.
That's an interesting,
and that's what makes American music so unique.
As you're getting involved in this, clearly you see. I'm assuming you're seeing that you're onto something. You've connected with something that hasn't really been discussed a lot. Right?
When I started, I'd been reading a lot about the blues, and I had been kind of disappointed thinking there's nothing new to write about the blues. Right. Everything's been written, and so that's why I was excited about it. But for a long time, it was like a music nerd thing, something I could pull out at parties and impress my friends.
And we got to talk about that. We've got a lot of musical friends here in town. But, so I guess obviously, clearly, you're a music fan. So now, give us a little bit. How deep does the jug scene go here?
Louisville produced the first jug bands to record. That's why we say it's the home of jug band music.
When was that?
In 1925. Wow. There was a blues singer named Sarah Martin who she started out as the Chitlin circuit. Mm-hmm. it was like the Theater Owners Booking Agency or Association, and they called it TOBA. And the black performers used to say it stood for Tough on Black Asses. So she came out of that whole black vaudeville scene, and she left her like around 1917. And so she was the first person to record Ain't Nobody's Business If I Do. She did a lot with Clarence Williams. And so in 1920, a singer from Cincinnati called Mamie Smith had the first hit blues song. It was called Crazy Blues. So every record company had to find a black singer. So OK Records got Sarah Martin. And so just like now with record companies, when somebody has a hit with something, everybody does it. So there was a novelty record craze in the early 20s. Somebody had a hit song with a ukulele orchestra, and everybody was looking for these strange combinations. And Sarah Martin, being from Louisville, knew about jug bands.
Wow.
And so she took 3 members of the Louisville Jug Band into the studio in New York, and they produced 10 sides that were released as Sarah Martin's Jug Band, and that influenced the band. Like Memphis Jug Band is the most famous of the jug bands, but Will Shade, their founder, said that he got the idea after he heard the Louisville groups.
Sarah. Oh, wow. So I can only imagine how in at that moment the reaction when you see something that just is totally alien, if you will. It's just so different, and then you're the sound, everything about it is just, well, it's music. It's just a different kind of music. But,
yeah. Well, Louisville jug music is closer to what ragtime. It's kind of like a proto jazz. It's different than other jug band music, because most jug bands are like string bands or country blues. You got the banjo, the mandolin, the guitar. But the Louisville bands incorporated jazz instruments into.
And that's I'm glad you brought that up, because when I think if you got a jug, someone who can play the jug, what are the ideal accompanying sound, music or instruments sound that you have to?
So the original Sarah Martin recordings, they had your basic traditional string band. Cal Smith was playing banjo. His uncle Clifford Hayes was on fiddle, and the jug player was Earl McDonald. And then those same guys a few years later are playing with Johnny Dodds and Earl Hines, Wow. And then the last recording that they did together, they recorded with Jimmie Rodgers, the father of country music.
Yeah. Wow.
So they were just really versatile musicians, really talented.
And this is
guys.
Still in that time frame of the 20s, 30s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jug music kind of went out of favor with the Depression. A lot of it changed. I think that you had just jug music was dance music, was called good time music. And it just lost its popularity, and especially among African Americans, because a lot of the songs are tied to the minstrel show, and they came out of the minstrel tradition, and so the newer younger generation didn't accept that, but it did go over to England. And a lot of the early rock bands started out as what they call skiffle musicians. They didn't call it jug music there. So, like the Beatles started out as a skiffle band called the Quarrymen. Eric Clapton.
I did not know that.
Not Eric, but Jimmy Page started out as a skiffle session guitarist.
Wow.
And and then it came back to America with the folk revival. At our National Jug Band Jubilee, we had Jim Queskin was our headliner, and he was the guy who turned like the Grateful Dead and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band onto the old jug band songs. He had recorded like Overseas Stomp, which was an old Louisville jug band tune. So that was great. So yeah, this last, I guess 2 weekends ago now, we had on Friday night, I curated an exhibit called Celebrating the Sounds of Kentucky.
It's at
the Fraser, and it's going to be there for a year. And then the following day, we had the Jug Band Jubilee, and we get people. This is how crazy, like, this is such a little niche thing, but the people into it are insane. We had last year a guy came from Tokyo just to come to our festival.
What?
And he came back this year.
Wow.
Like last year, he had such a good time because everybody, when we found out, everybody was buying.
So he's at this Fraser. He's at this.
No,
event.
he was at the Jug Band Festival is in Waterfront Park.
Gotcha. Okay.
So he was at Waterfront Park this year, but last year he just showed up and this Japanese guys taking pictures of everything, and we find out that he flew in from Tokyo.
That's cool.
For this.
That's very cool.
And then I was sitting at the merchandise booth, and a guy from Dallas, Texas came, and he had read my book the week before, looked up the Jubilee, and saw that it was the following weekend, and he just got in his car and drove to Kentucky.
Nice segue. The book, that book.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that book.
Okay, well, actually, this week is 5 years when the book came out, and it came about because I've written an article called "That Crazy Jug Band Sound," and it like summed up everything I knew. And the thing was, the information was sort of out there, but it was like a little bit here, a little bit of that. It helped I was in Louisville, that I could look up records and stuff. And so I cobbled together this story that was in Leo. It was in like Leo did a West End issue, and that's when the internet started, taking off. So I was getting emails about this article from Holland and stuff. It was just crazy. Then I got a call from the History Press, and they said, we hear you're the expert on jug bands. And I had just written one article, and they were like, we've been looking for somebody to write a book, and we want to offer you the chance to do it. So that's how it came about.
That's cool. Very cool.
So and since then, and it's the funny thing is when I was working on the book, my wife just thought it was crazy.
Is she a fan?
She's a fan now, but she wasn't a fan then.
Okay.
And so when we're dating and stuff, I'm like,
she's like
talking about this. And
What is this
then when I was working on the book, she was like, when are you going to write about something people want to read about? Yeah.
Cool, right?
Yeah. And so then it came out, and it won Best Local History from the Louisville Historical League.
Great.
I got invited to the Chicago School of Folk and all this.
Did she go to that with you?
She only went with me because there was a David Bowie exhibit in town that she wanted to go to.
That's probably a cool reason too.
So she said, "Who knew the world was waiting for a book about jug bands?"
That's a great question. And did you know?
I didn't know. It was just like following my passion at the time and interest in it. But since then, the Fraser exhibit, like all these things have come out of it, and I'm actually finishing up a book with some other writers right now. There's 6 of us. It's going to be a whole history of black music in Louisville.
Okay.
And
How
we're
far
hoping
back?
from the beginning, from Cato Watts, the
Wow.
slave that came with George Rogers Clark.
Wow.
So we are meeting this weekend, and hopefully we're going to be making the last changes, and we're hoping to get this out so that we can have the book opening at the Fraser, the book release party and all that. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of things. It really, changed my
It has,
career
yeah.
and sort of
This
slowly got
This-
me out of it.
But maybe I didn't catch this earlier. When you first heard of jug music, were you aware of it, and then how did that happen? Were you aware of it and then you heard it, or did you hear it and then was like, what is this?
Well, the only thing I really knew about jug band music was Emmett Otter's wedding, the Jim Henson thing,
yeah.
and the Darling family.
Yeah, but that was probably like
Yeah.
it just went over your.
When I actually listened to the CD that I bought, you recognize it as like kind of like Dixieland jazzy thing and bluesy, but it's weird because the bass handle the jug handles the bass parts. Like the jug is just a resonator, and the jug player makes the sounds by tightening or loosening his lips. So I'm sorry, I'm a little off today because I did go to Colonial Gardens earlier.
Well, pre-show you mentioned that, and you got to talk about that because that's in my old stomping ground, Colonial Gardens, which for us South Enders is across from Iroquois Park, Kenwood. Back in the day, Colonial had it going on, and then it got shut down, and it'd been just sitting there.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick it up from here.
Well, the city bought it from the family that owned it 6 years ago for like $430,000, and the Underhills got it from the city for $1, but they were going to invest $5 million into it. And it had been split up into 3 different properties. Right. And so we had to wait 3 years for Little Caesars to at least run out so they could move.
It's next door to it.
And then
which I frequent quite a bit.
The landmark part was in worse shape. I think they ended up spending like $6 million in the whole project. But El Taco Luchador opened about a month ago, and today I was at the preview, the soft opening for Union 15, a pizza place that's owned by the same people that own Pavilion in Germantown Lofts. It's 2 guys from the South End, so they wanted to do something there. So
come home.
So I think the official opening is Thursday, but
what's it basically going to consist of? Is there a theme, or is it just catering to a certain?
There's going to be 4 restaurants ultimately. I know Growlers USA from Jeffersonville is going to have a place there, and I'm not sure what the 4th one is, but it's 4 restaurants. They share a courtyard, and they got all kinds of like statues because that was the original zoo in the city that was a Sinning Zoo. So they got all these concrete animals and the Elvis statue because he supposedly performed at Colonial Gardens and everything. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
and there's people say that his grandparents lived in the South End, but I've never known that for sure.
You haven't dug that up?
No.
Come on, journalist.
Well, most people don't even realize "Happy Birthday to You" was written here. I wrote an article about that.
You did. Yeah, talk about that because we were talking about that in the past, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, 2 sisters. One of them was a kindergarten teacher, and the weird thing is I do what I do. I'm interested in this music history, and I moved a street over from where their cabin was when they were working on it, and my wife became the president of the Little Loom House, which is this nonprofit that preserves these cabins, and one of them is where Happy Birthday supposedly was sung for the first time.
When you say happy birthday, just making sure.
Happy birthday to you.
Now,
see,
I don't want to be a party pooper here, and I'm not trying to kill the buzz, but you think about it, Michael. It's not really a difficult song, though,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but
There's three. Basically, the line is "Happy Birthday to you" 3 times. And
Yeah.
then you bring the name.
but there's a reason behind
All right.
that.
Well,
though.
then enlighten
They
me.
were writing music for kindergarten kids. They
So
wanted
were
stuff
catering
that
it
was
to-
simple
gotcha. All right,
and
fair
where
enough.
you didn't need a trained
Okay.
voice.
All right.
And so they actually wrote a song called "Good Morning to All," and it would be what the kids would sing when they came in, and then they would start playing around with the lyrics. So
That makes sense.
for different occasions,
That
like
makes
it would be "Goodbye to All," "Happy Journey to All,"
Okay.
and then
Catering it to
"Happy
kindergarten.
Birthday."
That was the
yeah.
gist.
And
I get-
that's how it became the birthday song, because middle class and lower class people didn't start celebrating birthdays until like the beginning of the 20th century. Before
Really?
that, there wasn't a birthday song because it was only something rich people did. And so,
I didn't know that.
they're teaching this song to kindergarten kids,
Yeah.
and so easy that they could teach it to their
Right.
families. And so by the 20s, it became the birthday song. And we know that they wrote it because there were lawsuits over it. And they have copyright, the Mildred on the music.
Right.
Patty, the sister that was a kindergarten teacher, she didn't have any proof that she wrote the lyrics, but they were printed before. It's a whole copyright issue. The lyrics were printed before, and she didn't sue that guy. So what they did was give the sisters a third of the royalties. But there's legal proof that these two sisters from Louisville wrote this song.
If I sing it, I'm not going to get hit with some trademark.
It's in the public domain now, based on their 1893 copyright for their book.
Is this yours?
No, it's not.
Somebody left this.
So, but that's in 2016 it entered the public domain. But what I wrote about was the fact.
Whoa, 2016?
Yeah.
So recently.
Yeah. There was all these. It was a filmmaker because Warner Brothers had been collecting royalties on people. That's why in movies,
serious?
they wouldn't. They rarely sang it in movies because they didn't want to have to pay. Yeah, and Warner Brothers were still making good money on this. I think they were even charging people at Chuck E. Cheese and stuff. And so this filmmaker was like, this should be in the public domain. And everybody had said it before, but nobody wanted to take the time and the money just to take him to court over it.
Well,
So, it is in the public domain
that is
now.
crazy.
But
in recent.
Yeah. But it's like Louisville. It's
We've got some history. Good history here. Unique history.
It's always been a money town because you think of the Derby, even today. If you got a band, you can make money at Derby Town at times. So you imagine, like, if you're from New Orleans, you're touring, you're from Chicago, you're going to head to Louisville, and then all these local musicians, they're going to pick up on your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
a
you
good
got
point.
people,
Yeah.
and that Louisville-Chicago connection we talked about with indie rock, with Slint and all those guys going up to Chicago. Jug bands and we're doing that too. They were recording and playing shows there.
Good point. How much has? Of course, we know about New Orleans and all these other places. How influential is the music history in Louisville been out? Throughout.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things we tried to highlight in the Fraser exhibit.
Yeah.
I mean, we have just. Happy Birthday to You is the most popular song in the English language.
Yeah.
We have in the exhibit, we have Bill Monroe's suit and the mandolin. Mm-hmm. And you think of how influential
that's
bluegrass. That's we got Loretta Lynn.
Yeah.
We have a dress by Loretta Lynn in there. We have, we have something about WLOU. WLOU was the first radio station in Kentucky to be owned by African American and only the 5th in the country.
Oh, wow.
And in the 50s, they were playing gospel music on Sundays when gospel music wasn't being accepted in the church. So and so they helped popularize
Black
it in
gospel.
popularize it in the Midwest.
Yeah, wow.
So
See, now at this point, Michael, you're starting to show off all the shit you're uncovering. Pardon me, but it's amazing. Because that's what technically that's kind of what you guys do. You're as a journalist, you're telling stories that we're not familiar with, and the happy birthday, the whole Jug thing. Now I have to ask you, but back to Jug. I know with Jug music, there's like I've seen Glass, and then there's, I want to say maybe Stoneware. Is that is there one better than the other? What's the story there?
Well, it just depends on what kind of sound you can get out of it.
It is sound.
Yeah, okay. Any jug will do for drinking, but only specific jugs are good for music.
Is there a specific size, a certain size? Or is there, I don't know.
No, it depends on, I've seen jug players play all different things. Like at the Jubilee, we use milk cartons. We teach people how to blow on that,
Really? I guess you can,
yeah. So the reason that it really took off in the 1890s, about in New Orleans, they had this thing called spasm music, and it was these kid bands that were playing in Storyville. I mean, they really basically were playing in the red light district in front of bordellos. Really? And they were playing on homemade instruments, and there was this continuum of music along the river. So what was happening in New Orleans was happening in Cincinnati, was happening in Louisville. So in Louisville, we had the bourbon industry, and the bourbon, they called the jug the poor man's tuba. And so the bourbon industry was way into this in sponsoring these little kid bands. Right. So, they'd send them, because back then the jugs, they would have like a saloon's name on it, or, they might say, "Oh, Granddad." And so it was advertising for them. And just these kid bands grew up and they became actual musicians, A lot of the spasm musicians in New Orleans ended up becoming the first generation of jazzmen. When Alan Lomax interviewed Jelly Roll Morton at the Library of Congress, Jelly Roll said that spasm bands were the worst bands he ever heard, So.
You bring up another point. How important back in the day were the rivers? That's the pipeline.
Yeah. I mean that's like what the internet is today.
That's a good way to put it.
That's the information superhighway.
That was it.
Yeah.
And
then and the railroads too. And you have to think, after the Civil War, Louisville controlled all the working railroads to the south, because we were the home of the L&N Railroad. And that's what all the ex-Confederates came here, and a lot of the freed black people came here looking for jobs and, reconnecting with family. But even before the war, Louisville had the biggest population of free black people west of Baltimore. And that really shaped the black community here, because Louisville is a city where, black people never lost a vote, which always, gave them some little say in what was going on. But it also shaped the music and stuff, because we had this big black population. All these black professionals and teachers and stuff wanted to come to the city. So people forget that Louisville at one time we were one of the top 20 cities in the country, in most important places, and it had to do with logistics. The same reason that UPS is here.
Well, that's a good point. Well, I mean, I think importance in history never goes away. Yeah. So to me, Louisville will always be top 20.
Yeah.
Because
Well-
of the history.
Well, logistics, that's in our blood. And that's why, it basically, if you're shipping anything, you're coming around near us, through us, or around us, you know. So they're always saying
We've been a hub
yeah,
in a lot of different ways
yeah,
for a long time.
commercial hub, and so I look at it about the music, but I think Louisville's not unique. I think there's probably a lot of towns that have important music history that's overlooked because the record companies came along and they wanted to simplify the narrative.
Yeah, that's a good
so
point.
it's easier to say jazz started in New Orleans and it's all about New Orleans. Our blues is all about the Delta, even though you had it in all these other cities.
It's because
happening.
there's not a Michael Jones out there to uncover, turn over those rocks. So, what's what projects are you currently working on?
Well, I'm finishing up this book project, and I'm going to be doing some things throughout the year for the Fraser to go along with the exhibit. On November 21st, we're going to do a listening room with Marvin Maxwell from Mom's Music and some other people. We're hoping to get John Timmons involved, but he's on the fence about it, so I still have to talk to him. But we are going to do it, and Saraban Books is going to sponsor a poetry reading to go along with the exhibit. And then I'm writing a book about the Russell neighborhood, the history of the Russell neighborhood, and hopefully I will have that out sometime by next Christmas or something.
Okay.
And
Staying with that real quick, give me an example. Give me some history there. What can you share?
Well, Russell along Walnut Street, that's where all the clubs were. That's where.
How far back in history are we talking about?
About like the 40s was the height of Walnut Street.
All right, gotcha.
And that all that got destroyed in urban renewal. But there were black clubs there that all the big performers, Duke Ellington and all that, it was on this tour,
right.
This Toba tour. And so, it was like kind of like the place to be. And so mostly it's going to be about that history and what we lost in Russell, because Russell is a really interesting neighborhood because since the 1840s, it was like a black community. There was a small section of it that was a free black community, but Germans lived there too. And it was because they were immigrants and people, didn't want to live near them, so they settled in their black communities. And one way that I've been tracking the growth of a neighborhood is through the churches, because like if you go across from Beach and Terrace, there's a German church. St. Peter's.
Wow. Okay.
And, all through the West End, you'll see these churches. And so when the black churches start, you can tell, like, the far West End was still white until after the flood.
Gotcha.
And so funeral homes and churches, that's where the Radamans started out in Russell neighborhood. And so that's what I talked to a German historian. I interviewed him for the book, and he told me just go through the records and look for churches and funeral homes, and it's going to tell you who's living in the neighborhood now.
Wow.
I
get
so
that.
it's like I've been going through like 1900s newspapers, looking at the obituaries and the home ads too, because sometimes they'll say colored in the in the little box by ad for a house and things like that. So
sad but true. But
yeah.
and then you're saying that's going to be out maybe Christmas of
Yeah.
next year, 2020.
Yeah. I mean, we're really close on the music book. Basically, they're just waiting for me to to finish this chapter on gospel music. And I will, the gospel choir that sung at the Meghan Markle's wedding
Yeah.
is coming to the Brown Theater on October 16th.
Okay, that's
And I'm
cool.
going to give a talk before that about gospel music in Louisville.
That's
And I'm
cool.
also the artist in residence at the South Central Library in October. And so on October 5th, I'm going to be part of a panel discussion for people that want to be freelance writers. And on the 10th, October 10th, I'm going to give a talk about river music that I call River City Notes. And then on the 27th at 2, I'll give a talk about the Hill Sisters and Happy Birthday.
It's the Michael
So-
Jones infomercial right now, and this man is on it.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's just all like kind of coincided because usually, well, the weird thing is like my wife's been gone all summer.
where was he?
She got a job. She got an opportunity to open her own clinic. She's a physical therapist. And so she's going to be opening a couple of clinics for this company called Benchmark that's based in Knoxville. So
Traveling.
the first one's going to open by the Churchill Downs. And so they offered her a chance to, spend the summer there working and training. So she comes home on the weekend. So she's gone Sunday through Friday, and she works half day Friday and comes home. And so I've had all this time, like everybody's
now,
like,
yeah,
"You're so
that
productive
yeah.
right now." And I was
I wonder
like,
why.
"Yeah, because my wife's not like, we're doing this tonight," or I
Your wife's not telling you what to do
Yeah.
from Sunday through Thursday, right?
Yeah, she's gonna be mad.
Which means you have no excuse not to to do your thing. I like that.
So all that is her clinic's opening, I think, October 28th. And so right now, besides the listening room we're going to do, I don't have anything planned for November or December. So I've got to wait for my wife to tell me what I'm doing then. So
You're allowed. You've been married how long?
10 years.
Okay, yeah.
10 years in August. But my wife is like funny because if I'm like doing anything, like she like thinks half the time what I'm talking about's ridiculous, But then,
Once the paychecks start
if I'm
coming in.
watching U of L game or something, she'll go, "Don't you have writing to do?"
Oh, she plays it both ways,
Yeah.
and that's not fair. Mrs. Jones. So, damn, you got a busy schedule, immediate schedule. That's short term.
Yeah.
Give me a Michael Jones bucket list item. Something.
Man, I just don't. Ultimately, I want to write a follow-up to the Jug Band book and really kind of widen it and talk about jug band music as a whole in all the other cities, and kind of what my idea is. How you hear like there are these field songs and work songs, and then yada yada yada. Then there was blues and all this stuff. And I like what was happening between those times.
Yeah. Fill in those blanks for us, man.
Like one thing for working on this exhibit I really thought about is if you think about that 50 years from the end of the Civil War to like the early 1910s or whatever, we got blues, ragtime, jazz, the beginning of country music. Like what was happening in this country that unleashed all that creativity.
Aliens. The aliens.
And but that's the same time, we were industrializing.
That's a good point.
We
That's a
went
good
from more from people living in farms to to more people living in cities.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm just interested in like I look at like music is what I'm interested in, but you know, it's part of this greater history that's going on. And so I'm like a history buff and a music nerd.
like
so
that.
I got those combinations going.
You do. You got it very much covered. Okay, before we let you go, I do this little thing called Round of Shots. It's my little rapid fire Q&A.
All right.
All right. You'll be okay. First concert you attended.
Fresh Fest with Run DMC and Houdini and the Fat
That
Boys.
is so badass. That's so bad. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I would. I don't know. I've thought about this too. I can't. I don't know. I
Give me
guess I would
something.
just like to see the future. So
Okay. All right.
yeah.
If you were stuck in an elevator with a celebrity, who would that be?
Tricky.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, I love. He's one of my favorite musicians. And I've actually interviewed him before.
Oh, really?
And we had a great conversation.
You interviewed him, so you've already spent time doing.
Well,
it.
I mean,
All right.
I talked to him on the phone,
Okay. All right.
but we had a great conversation. But any member of Massive Attack, really, I'm a big.
I like that.
They're my all-time favorite group. So,
Give me a Michael Jones pet peeve.
oh man, I have many. My wife says that I'm a
When your wife
curmudgeon.
tells you to go watch another football or sporting event or something.
I don't. I hate when people bring their dogs to our house.
Wait a minute, people bring their dogs to your house.
Yeah, my wife's mother and my stepdaughter. Like
When
I
they
have
show up,
they just bring their dogs to our house, and I'm a cat person. I have like a cat, and then
But
I
at the
have
same-
all these feral cats that I take care
But
of.
if you're going to someone's house, you're not taking your cat.
No, yeah. I just think
that's kinda
like, why
odd.
do you want to bring your
I
dog to
don't
my
know.
house all the time? Yeah,
Family, I don't want to leave him alone.
but people do it all
That's
the
interesting.
time, and but you know the funny thing is like now I'm working as a research assistant at the American Printing House for the Blind, and so there's dogs everywhere, but they're very well behaved.
There's a purpose for that.
Yeah, they're service
Yeah,
dogs.
service.
And so, but when I first started working there, I just thought everybody was so nice because where you go, people are constantly saying, you know, good morning, good morning. But then I learned that it was etiquette because blind people need to know you're there. And so everybody gets into the habit of saying it.
that's-
So I was
okay,
like,
well,
oh, they're
totally
not
makes
so
sense.
nice.
Yeah. All right, so it's a show.
Yeah.
It's just part of the
Yeah,
routine.
I'm turning 50 next month, you know.
Welcome to the 50
And so
club.
my
I'm already
wife's
there.
like, I'm a curmudgeon because I don't like pets or kids. And so
Pretty soon you're not going to like people either. So,
Yeah.
all right. If you had access to a time machine and you can go anywhere in the past just to observe, you're not going to change the future or whatever. You're going to just hang out, be a part of it. Where would you go?
Oh, I would go back to the 1950s and hang out with Chuck Berry and Little Richard.
That's cool. That would be good. All right, these last three
All right.
are what I consider, and a lot of people would too, the three most important questions in the world. First two are yes or no. Last one, give me an answer in one sentence.
All right.
Is there a God?
I would hope so, but I don't know for sure.
Good answer. You don't know? You don't know. Two, are we alone in the universe?
Oh, I hope not.
I hope not either. Three, what happens when we die?
I'll tell you after I die. I'll let you know.
You'll come back.
Yeah,
You'll come back
I'll
and do a
get back to you on
podcast
that.
after that one. Michael, thanks for coming back and hanging out with me. Where can
right.
people connect with you on social media or
Well,
whatever?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram at BluesHound2000. And through the Jug Band Jubilee website, jugbandjubilee.com. So, and I'm always around.
know,
You know, I do a lot of writing now for Louisville Magazine and Food and Dining Magazine. So
I did
you can
see
also,
something in Food and Dining recently. One of the magazines I saw.
Yeah,
you did something. Yeah,
that
saw
on
something.
something on the people that own this bar.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
They own the Manhattan Project.
The
too.
Manhattan
Yeah.
Project. Too, that's right. Well, Michael, thanks for hanging out with me.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
All right, thanks for having
And
me.
we'll
Hopefully,
do it again.
get by the exhibit.
I do want to do.
It'll be up until through September 2020.
All right.
All
We'll
right.
do it. Thanks, man.